Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming to our event. Before we begin, I'd like to give an introduction of our speaker, Thomas Suarez, and appreciate the people who we really couldn't have done this event without. First, the introduction. Mr. Suarez, he's one of the youngest venture capital-backed CEOs in Silicon Valley, and he's the founder of Teleportal, which is essentially an augmented and virtual reality platform, which helps developers build network spatial software. As a former student at Georgia Tech and the youngest researcher ever at the selective Samsung Research America Labs, he's a passionate advocate for youth in tech. He's been hosted at the World Government Summit, and he's also given TED Talks, which have garnered tens of millions of views. And if you guys have ever watched this 12-year-old app developer TED Talk that maybe your parents showed to you, yeah, that's him. We'd also like to thank our amazing club advisor, Mrs. Martin, for her invaluable guidance and support, as well as the AI Club for co-hosting this event. I'm actually a former student and now an officer as part of the AI Club, and I highly recommend you guys to join it if you're interested in learning some of the ML and AI technologies Tom covers in his talk. The way this event will work is that we'll split it into two parts. The first segment will be a talk from Tom for the first 20 minutes, and then the second segment will be a Q&A with Tom. And when we reach the Q&A, I can go more over the format to make sure it's nice, clean, and organized. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Krish. I'll be running the Q&A for this event.
I'm Aditya, and I'll be monitoring the Zoom event.
I'm Sanjay.
I'm Ray.
And me and Ray will be compiling your guys' questions to ask Mr. Suarez during Q&A.
All right, Tom, would you like to go ahead and share the screen?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much, Krish. All right. Can everyone see that?
I can see it.
Cool.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for joining. And thank you, Krish and Miss Martin. And oh, sorry, getting Zoom. Okay, never mind. But yeah, thank you so much for hosting me, and it's so awesome to be here, talking with you all virtually. Just do a quick introduction. Also, I'm Tom, Mr. Suarez, Tom, whatever. I'm 21 years old, software and electronics engineer, currently building Teleportal, which is a spatial computing startup, primarily based out of Los Angeles, but we kind of work remotely and based all over the country. And I was formerly studying computer science over at Georgia Tech. So I'd really like to just share some of my personal journey with you. Hopefully it's relatable, or you can pick out some interesting bits out of it. And there are some lessons learned along the way that I'd love to share as well. And then we'll go into Q&A. We can talk about Teleportal, we can talk about spatial computing, app development, really anything in technology or computer science or anything related that you guys would like to talk about. I'm always down and happy to nerd out about stuff like that. So about 2010, I started really getting into iOS development. Xcode was the first real IDE that I was getting into, and I was just really fascinated by the iPhone SDK and what the things that you could develop using a smartphone at the time, because a smartphone was kind of this next generation of a computing device. Like, we started out with these mainframe computers, and then we went to desktop computing, and then to the internet and the World Wide Web, and now to these smartphones, and from there the iPhone SDK. And so that was such an incredible transition, and I really got into software development around that transition point. We also have another transition point, which is spatial computing, which I'll get into soon. But iOS development, I was really excited. So I started self-teaching Objective-C, C and Java, some kind of initial programming languages, as well as Python, just to kind of understand how computer science worked and how programming principles worked on kind of a lower level, all the way up to the highest level in terms of iOS development and later servers in Android. But it was really, really interesting. So I started developing a few applications for iOS, published them to the App Store, and other students started asking me, hey, how do I get into this? How do I, start developing apps for iPhone or for whatever platform? And so I started an app club at my local middle school to help teach app development, similar, I suppose, to the AI club. So I gave a TEDx talk about it. I was invited to, just to give this talk in front of a few hundred people, And I really didn't think it was going to go that far. I thought I was just talking to people in my community about the app club, and it ended up going viral. I think it really struck a nerve with people who wanted to learn app development and wanted to learn how to build software and this kind of explore this new creative medium of software development. And so that opened up a plethora of opportunities that I'm very, very thankful for. But it was really, really cool to kind of be part of that. After that, I started working and getting into hardware. So went from the software focus to wanting to know more about how hardware works. We, of course, when we're building code, we are building at this very, very high level of the software stack. And eventually that gets compiled down into machine code, which goes through a physical device like a processor, and gets executed through the operating system level layers. But I was really interested in kind of what happens on the hardware level too. So I started getting into 3D printing. One of my biggest challenges with 3D printing was that it was slow and it was really difficult to modify. So I started working on a new type of 3D printer called Orb, which is designed to be super fast with a polar 3D coordinate system instead of Cartesian, as well as be more of a modular foundation. That is some of the hardware in my garage. Very, very early prototypes. Later went into kind of there's a later prototype of Orb, but just got really interested in kind of developing software more on an embedded level. And this is one of my favorite images of the entire process, not because there are just 3 boards and 3 iterations of this particular design, but because of the failures along the way. This first board that you see on the left, this was a breadboard. Putting wires together, it's not super permanent. It's a very ephemeral kind of circuit, but I was able to prototype this motor module. The whole printer was modular, so you can kind of swap in standardized modules. This is a motor module, and I was just prototyping that, brought it over to this perforated board, and back in 2013, 2014, when I was working on this, was the first time that I had actually started soldering to a perf board. And so this board took me probably an hour or two, and of course it'd be a lot quicker now, but back then it took an hour or two. And I inspected the board, kind of looked it over, made sure that everything was good. And I was like, okay, great. I'm finally ready to plug in the 12 volts into this DC barrel jack right here and turn it on. And as soon as I plugged in the 12 volts, the entire thing fried. And I was kind of mad because I had just fried this fairly expensive PCB with its integrated circuit on it. And I was like, well, what the heck happened? And it turned out there was a tiny piece of solder bridging on the other side of this, actually, on this L293D motor driver. Tiny piece of solder bridging the 12 volt line and the 5 volt line. 5 volt was logic and 12 volt was kind of input power, and it fried the entire thing. At that point, I just looked for better alternatives to a perf board, went to a PCB, this is printed circuit board, and everything worked pretty well. But this is just one of many, many examples along the way where you kind of go from this failure point of, wow, okay, this completely failed, but it actually turned out that I was able to make a better circuit board out of it because kind of found this failure point. And if I hadn't had that failure, I probably would have just left the board like this. So this is why I really believe that failure is just success in a different context. Of course, went to the later stages of Orb, got better at prototyping. These are laser cut parts, and kind of more stable disc attached to a motor. But then I also started really getting to augmented reality, and this particular video of Google Glass is what got me extremely excited by the idea of spatial computing or augmented reality in general. So I don't know if there's audio coming through. Let's see. Oh, there we go. But the idea is that you have this kind of, sorry, I have a lot of audio on my end, so there we go. The idea is that you have these contextual pieces of information that are coming up over your daily life. You have these glasses that you put on, or some display, some heads-up display that has data that is relevant to your current situation. So in this case, this person is looking up at the sky, and the glasses are telling them, here's the weather. It's a very simple example, but it is more about contextual computing. This is a very specific part of human-computer interaction, or HCI research. And this was extremely interesting to me. I couldn't get my hands on Google Glass at the time, so I started building my own. And this is just using a Raspberry Pi, as well as an Arduino, and later on added Android into the mix. So this is Linux, and then you have an Android device as kind of a controller. But I was just trying to put together my own version. Eventually joined the Glass Explorer program, so I do still wear Google Glass kind of on a pretty daily basis at this point, and run Linux on it now as kind of a research device. But that was a really, really fun project. These are some early tests. I was very young. But some early kind of computer vision tests. There are a lot of really cool computer vision problems in spatial computing. So if you're interested in computer vision or machine learning, whether that's deep learning or beyond, definitely recommend getting into some form of graphics or spatial computing. This was a render of what I eventually wanted the glasses to look like, with more of a Pepper's Ghost effect of on these TFT or OLED panels. So then was going from that augmented reality portion, working on those glasses, working on hardware, and then decided to jump back into software. So in 2015, was really interested in laser tag. I loved playing laser tag with my friends. Growing up, I always looked forward to it every year. We kind of only went once or twice a year to a laser tag place. But what I started to realize is that the sensors and radios that we have in modern smartphones already have the capability of facilitating a real-world laser tag experience. They already have a GPS for localization. They already have a compass and an IMU in general for orientation information, as well as kind of acceleration information, and a cellular modem, so we can actually register hits on multiple devices. We have a camera, so we can overlay information. It's like, this device already has everything we need. We don't have to put on clunky vests or go to a specific place. We can play laser tag anywhere, anytime with just our smartphone. And so I started building a early version of that, early prototype back in 2015, and did some tests at the park and the beach, and it was a lot of fun. So ran into so many different issues and challenges with server development, with Android development, with iOS development. At one point, I was working on 3 code bases simultaneously, Android, iOS, and the server, which taught me another lesson, which is to try to get one thing done and then go on to the next, especially if you're working on multiple platforms at the same time. But that was a lot of fun, and we actually did some tests at the park and the beach. So this is a test later on. So what you'll see is some early versions of a kind of a UI. Let's see. Yeah, so these are some early versions of the UI, and so the UI is actually floating out in space in front of us. You'll notice that the user interface is not necessarily directly on the phone screen. I mean, we are tapping it with a raycast, but it is more out in in the physical space. But I'll get more into that in a little bit, spatial computing. Had the chance to go on a show called Planet of the Apps, which was a show being put on by Apple about app development and developers working on kind of next generation apps. Got to meet Will.i.am, which was awesome, and worked with his team on the logo design and some other kind of hardware designs, as well as general direction for the app. We had a launch party, which was a lot of fun. And we actually were featured on the App Store. So we got about 30 to 40,000 downloads of YTag, and then had all those people moving smoothly through the servers. But getting the servers to that point took a lot of network engineering and other really interesting things, which actually took us to, let's see. Yeah, it took us to Teleportal. So YTAG turned into Teleportal at a certain point. I met Ryan Reed, who's now the VP of product at Teleportal, over some hackathons. This is actually an example of one of the hackathons that we did together at the MIT Media Lab. There's Ryan. And we worked together to decouple the YTAG infrastructure from a developer-facing SDK. So that became Teleportal, and now we're kind of offering the same technologies that powered YTAG through networking, localization, kind of augmented reality, spatial computing in general, for developers everywhere. So you can actually go to teleportal.dev, download the SDK, and play around with it. It's really cool, and we welcome all feedback over Discord and other places. But around this time, this was 2018 at this point, and I was going to college. I just graduated high school, and I went to Georgia Tech for computer science. This was, obviously challenging, running classes and the startup at the same time. I look really happy in this picture though. And I'm sure a lot of you are running, maybe projects on the side with school and kind of trying to balance the school with the projects, which is always interesting, balance from an assignments perspective, and from, working on your own projects as well as, family. But I think it was an interesting time where I had multiple different things going on as well as research. But around that time as well, we were back in LA powering a world scale mixed reality experience called Gravity. And I had like a kind of a command center set up at Georgia Tech to beam in virtually. So the cool thing was this command center was actually in Atlanta at my dorm. This is under the bed. And the actual event was happening in Los Angeles. We were able to beam in directly through Teleportal. So it was a really cool use case of the platform. Had a lot of late nights my first week, and came back to my dorm room at like 6 a.m. every night. My roommate probably thought I was insane, but anyway. So yeah, we pivoted to Teleportal V2 the next year. This is 2019. Ryan and I at GDC, the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco. And then it turned out that it made more sense to go full-time on it. Ryan left DreamWorks Animation, and I left Georgia Tech to focus on Teleportal full-time at this time. So this was my setup at home right when the V2 transition kind of happened, and we pivoted to kind of working on this full-time. So now we're working on a few different things. We're working on, of course, our SDK for spatial computing developers. We're working on a enterprise partnership with a company called AnArt, who's doing these really cool world-scale mixed reality experiences with artists. And we're also working on our own virtual production tools. So these are tools that are similar to what you'd find kind of on the highest level of production at studios like Disney. But we're trying to bring it down to the everyday user like TikToker. So we actually have an application called Vortex that's coming out in the new year. But if you'd like to try it out right now, you can go to beta.vortex.film, and I'll put that into the chat later. But you can try it out, and please give us feedback on it. We're interested. But I can do a quick demo of it right now as well. So this will kind of give you an idea of what Teleportal technology looks like in action and what is next. So let's see. I'm going to share from iOS here. So Teleportal SDK works on pretty much every immersive device, whether it's iOS, Android, Magic Leap, desktop, VR, all those things. But we will be demoing with an iOS device for now.
Can anyone else see the screen share?
I think it's still coming up.
Got it.
One sec. There we go. There we go. Awesome. So this is a application that we're working on right now. It's still pretty early, but this is a sneak preview into what this looks like. And so I'm going to go into the cyberpunk scene. So when you go into a Teleportal application, you'll kind of log in with a name, and this identifies you with an avatar. And then you're actually able to use a joystick to move around by default. So, hey, there's Ryan. Ryan's in here with me live. That's pretty awesome. So yeah, you can change avatars. There's Mr. Meeseeks from our Rick and Morty scene. Hey, there we go. You emote, Ryan? He's in the call. But there we go. But there are multiple viewpoints here. So I can actually go into a third person view. And so what you'll see is this is actually very similar to a video game. And that's what virtual production is about. It's actually kind of using existing 3D graphics engines that power video games and power, CAD and architecture and things like that, to create an environment for directors and filmmakers to create movies in. Hey, Morty. So that's, we have a few different views here. We have a free camera, so you can actually wander around and experience this set together, and kind of place cameras. And I'm going to go back into third person touch. I'd really like to show you this part, which is the room scale part. And this is what you'll normally see out of a Teleportal application. So if I stick my hand out, you'll actually see I'm being superimposed into the environment, and there I am. In the environment with with the characters. So this is, of course, an amazing filmmaking tool. We're trying to, add additional features like a timeline and animation, but really trying to get feedback on what works and what doesn't. And I think this could really democratize, not only spatial computing, but this particular use case of spatial computing for everyone. And I'll go into the Rick and Morty scene too, because I'm a fan of Rick and Morty. It's kind of a cool set. There's Rick's spaceship. Okay, anyway, that's enough of that. Switch back to the screen share because there's just a couple other things. So yeah, long term, what we're working on at Teleportal is a 3D operating system. So, we are focused on our SDK and of course Vortex, but eventually those do come together in an operating system that reimagines the way that kernels and existing kind of low-level systems work at the lowest level. So we're pretty excited about this. We'll have more to share on this soon, but this image is actually the kind of experience that we're trying to facilitate, with physical objects being linked to digital ones, and users being able to use whatever device they have, whether it's smart glasses, tablets, or phones, to interface with this shared environment. So some key takeaways from this talk: failure is just success in a different context. Remember, I showed that those three boards together, the breadboard, the perf board, and the PCB, or the printed circuit board. All of those are just iterations. Those are evolutions, but in a way they're also revolutions. They are the same and also completely different at the same time. And I wouldn't have known to go to the next one without failing on the first one. So failure is just success in a different context. Another really important one to me is that ethics can and should be embedded in the technology that we build. There's kind of this idea in technology, and especially in Silicon Valley, that says that, I'm going to build technology, and the technology is going to be inherently neutral. It is up to the user, or it is up to whoever I'm licensing this technology to decide what, if it's good for good or for bad. And I think while that is true to an extent, there are ways that we can guide the technology while it's being developed in certain ways, down certain paths, good or bad. And we should always choose that good path. I think Apple is a great example of this, building privacy into the systems directly in the tech stack. And then also, for us at Teleportal, spatial computing, we believe, is set to disrupt the current paradigm. So any way that, if you want to use, spatial computing needs everyone. Spatial computing needs computer graphics, experts. Spatial computing needs machine learning experts. People who do networking, people who do art. It needs everyone. So we appreciate everyone joining the spatial computing revolution. because we do believe that it is the next big computing paradigm. But yeah, that's all I have. So thank you everyone again. My Twitter is @TomTheCarrot. You can email me hello@tomthecarrot.com or join our Discord. We have a Teleportal developers Discord that we'd love for you to be a part of. And with that, if anyone has any questions, I may hopefully have answers. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom, for that presentation. It was really awesome, especially like where you showed the projects you did as a kid. Hopefully that helped inspire some people here to pursue going after these projects too.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Yeah. So now we'll be moving onto the Q&A segment of our speaker event, where all of you guys have the opportunity to ask questions to Tom. We have a couple of guidelines, however. So if you'd like to, broadcast your question publicly and allow people to upvote on it, you can simply put it in the everyone chat. And then if you see a question that you like, you can simply add this caret sign. It looks like so. So, that way, whichever question has a lot of carets, we'll know that people are interested in it. We can bring it up as soon as possible. Oh, some people are telling me that everyone chat isn't enabled. Mrs. Martin, do you think we could do that?
Give me a moment. They should be able to chat with the hosts.
Okay, that's fine.
So they can't see. Do you want me to open that up?
If you could open up everyone, that would be good.
Yep. I just did. Hopefully it'll work.
Can somebody test it out who's not a co-host? All right, great.
There we go.
Yeah, so essentially you guys could put in questions like, I don't know, what is your favorite color? And then let's say someone else liked that question, they could just do a caret sign right underneath that. And that's how we know which questions are getting the most interest. Additionally, if you're a little shy, you can always feel free to private message Ray or Sanjay, and they'll also notify me of your guys' questions. All right, and with that, it seems like
a lot of carets.
Yeah, one of the most popular questions right now are, what advice do you have for people who want to pursue a similar path as you?
Yeah. So in software development, I mean, there is this idea of like picking a language to start with. And it's like, okay, what language should I learn first? Should I learn Python? Should I learn C, Objective-C if you're really adventurous, or Java or whatever? And I think more than any particular language, it's learning the concepts of computer science, and you can definitely learn that through a language. I think it'll be different for everyone. It kind of depends on what your starting point is. So for me, my favorite way to jump into any problem is to do it hands-on and to do it completely diving into the deep end. And that is really scary sometimes. And it's just one of many ways to do it. I know some people who prefer to kind of ease into a problem, then go down, then go down, then go down, and then they're like, okay, now I understand the whole stack. But if you think of a computer as this Jenga set of different, or this tower of different things that need to go on, you have hopefully the most stable things at the bottom, which are your processor and hardware things. Then you have firmware, and then you have software, and on that software you have things like the operating system and kernel space, and then you have things in user space like your applications. So if you can kind of think of it like a tower, and you're most of the time going to be writing software at the top of this tower or somewhere close to it, then you can always go down. My favorite way to do it is to go the bottom. So that would be languages like C. Probably wouldn't do assembly immediately, but C, and you can really see how pointers are structured. And if you go into C++, you can see object-oriented principles and things like that. And then you can work your way up to Java and Python and like JavaScript and things like that. That's my favorite way to do it. Kind of dive in the deep end, learn the concepts, fail, succeed, fail, succeed, and then go up the stack from there to more and more higher level abstractions. But if you're looking to get started in robotics, probably, on the C or C++, would be great because that is very low level. You're mainly going to be dealing with real-time embedded operating systems, or maybe no operating system at all. So being able to write just straight C is very useful. If you're looking to do websites like JavaScript, TypeScript, I'd recommend TypeScript these days because it is strongly typed and has a lot of nice features on top of existing JavaScript. If you want to do data science, Python or R, something like that, it kind of just depends on what your entry point is, what your favorite thing that you want to do in computer science is. But regardless of what language you choose, regardless of what environment you're in, it's all bits, it's all zeros and ones, it's all binary instructions to a physical device. Eventually, you'll have all the kind of same knowledge. It'll normalize at a certain point.
Got it. And then we're seeing a lot of interest from people who'd like to know what languages you know, what languages you recommend to get started with, and what Teleportal is coding in.
Yeah, that's a fun one. I think kind of it goes back to the last question, which is, what advice would you give new coders? C, C++ for robotics, it's some of the things I mentioned earlier. Just the language that you choose kind of depends on the environment or the technology that you're building for a lot of times. But eventually it'll all be basically the same in your head. Like when I pick up a new language, unless there are some really different things about it, the different ways that it manages memory or something like that. Like Rust is particularly cool too. Like I'm still in the early days of learning Rust even. But all of those concepts are still pretty similar. And the other thing to keep in mind about a language is that it's not just the language. Like when we think about English or Spanish or any spoken language or written language as, okay, this is a language for communication, it goes beyond the language. Like it goes, when you learn a new language, you're learning about a new culture as well. And it's a similar thing for learning programming. When you learn a new programming language, you're not just learning the new syntax rules. You are learning a completely different environment. You are learning a completely different way of doing things. And like Java doesn't compile the same way as C. And C doesn't compile, in quotes, compile the same way as Python. They're very different in the way they operate under the hood. To us, it looks like a language, but as soon as you want to start optimizing things and doing more advanced operations, that's when you really want to have like a lower level understanding of like the culture part of it. What else is going on underneath? So again, kind of depends, but try to really read into not just the syntax, but eventually what's underneath, how does it compile, or how does it interpret, or how is it different than other languages?
And then we're also getting a lot of questions about Teleportal specifically, more of how you guys coded it, what are some of its features, and what it looks like right now, and what are you planning for the future?
Yeah, so that's right. So the other part of that question was kind of what is Teleportal coded in, and then I'll go into some features. So Teleportal is actually coded in quite a few different languages and environments. We target Unity. So Unity is we have a Unity wrapper. Unity is not like Teleportal. It is not what we base it on, but we do have a bridge over to Unity, just like we have a bridge over to 3JS or, in progress, a bridge over to Unreal Engine. We write most of that in C# and C++, because that's where our API is exposed, is typically C# for developers. And then some of that's written in C#, and then some more like optimized native code is written in C++. We have more like operating system level stuff that's in the works in other languages, including one that we're writing ourselves. And then our server kind of spans a lot of different languages. TypeScript is one of them, Python. We have a lot of different things in use. And then, of course, the web, it would be like, JavaScript as well, and TypeScript. And then Objective-C for some iOS things, Java for some Android things. It's really just a lot of different languages. It's very well structured, but there's a lot of stuff going on there. And then kind of the primary features of Teleportal, we're really focused on crafting a spatial computing environment, not necessarily just the localization, not necessarily just like a 3D data store, and not necessarily just kind of like bringing Internet of Things devices online, but all of those things together in one cohesive distributed open system. So this is why we are, our Teleportal is architected in a very specific way, primarily because it's, partially because it's good from a technical perspective and very scalable, but partially because it also fits the ethos of the company, being privacy first, and ethically focused.
And then we also had a couple of people wondering how you guys use AI in Teleportal.
Yeah, so AI is, in this case, like deep learning and some computer vision as well, I think falls under that. Used a lot for kind of localization style things. We use some AI at Teleportal, definitely increasing on it. But in general, in spatial computing, it's used for localization. It's used for mapping, a lot of computer vision, some data science as well. But I think primarily be on that kind of simultaneous localization and mapping side for SLAM, which is actually what gives you your head pose meaning the device, its orientation and position within the scene relative to other devices. So we do some of that, increasing on that, and then that's more kind of general.
Got it. And then a couple of people were wondering about your personal experience with the business side of Teleportal. Like specifically how you went through financing your projects, what were some of the struggles you encountered, etc.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the cool thing about software is that with software projects, you don't have the physical component of having to buy hardware and having to ship hardware and having to, every time you come up with a new design for your printed circuit board, you have to fabricate a new one, and that uses raw materials like that is, and then people's labor, of course. So that becomes really expensive. The really cool thing about software is you can bootstrap it for quite a while, and at Teleportal we've definitely gone through times where, I mean, we have investors now funding us, which we're really, really thankful for. That was an interesting process in and of itself. Just kind of learning how to run a business, because I'm an engineer at heart. I created the business around Teleportal, not so much to just make a ton of money or, strike it big or whatever. Like, I don't care about any of that. What I care about is Teleportal on the best track to hit, to reach as many people as it can in a positive way. And if it's doing that, I'm happy. So Teleportal itself as a company is an organization around a central team. It's around a core set of beliefs, and it's around a product. We did not start Teleportal Inc. to make a ton of money. And if it makes a ton of money, great. If it doesn't, but we reach a lot of people, that is awesome. And that's just how I feel about it. I get businesses are supposed to make money, and like that is one of the things that we do have to focus on running a business, and a startup that is growing, that has investors. But I think when you build a product, and when you build technologies, and you have a passion for it, and there is a need for it out there, like you're gonna be okay. But yeah, like software wise, the cool thing is we can make a mistake in terms of in development, hopefully not in production, but in the development stack. If we make a mistake and we kernel panic a computer, it's not as big of a deal as like some blue smoke rising from an integrated circuit that we bought for $100, which has happened before, and it's really frustrating to see, because you look at this board and you're just like, $100 gone, awesome. So that's pretty frustrating. But in software, the main thing I think that you need to finance beyond equipment is your time, because it's time that you could have spent working a job or those kinds of things, to actually like pay rent and eat food. So I think there's a balancing act there too. But the cool thing is that if you can get your product out or get some MVP out early, then you can at least verify if it is something that people like. And if not, you can go back to the drawing board. We still do this at Teleportal. This is a very common practice in Silicon Valley. Kind of iterate, launch, iterate, launch, iterate, launch until you get it right. Yeah.
Has there ever been times where like your technological ambitions and like, you know, your vision for the future sort of rubbed against what investors were expecting of you to sustain the business?
Yeah, that's definitely happened. Usually it happens actually in the first conversations with an investor. It doesn't usually happen like with investors that we've had. In fact, I don't think we've ever had kind of a scenario in which we've had an argument with any of our current investors, like ever, in terms of like product, going about business or this or that. One of the core things that we did and we continue to do is, you know, any relationship is a two-way street, and that goes for investors and startups as well. Because while they are providing you with capital and with, you know, advice, you are also providing them with, you know, the potential of your startup becoming huge. And it's not to say that that's inherently transactional, but it is to say that it is still kind of a two-way relationship. And so we try to be very upfront with investors at the beginning of the conversation. Hey, this is what we're about. You know, we don't sell data, we don't do this, we don't do that, but here are all the things we do, and we are interested in. And we've actually been able to locate the investors and the partners that we appreciate and that we can, you know, work together with like really, really well. So, you know, if we hadn't done that, now we might be having problems. But we were just very upfront. We said, this is what Teleportal's about, and these are the things that Teleportal's not about. And that made it a lot easier. It didn't make it easier to raise capital, but once you've raised the capital, once you find the people who agree with you, this goes for a team, that goes for, you know, VCs, it goes for any relationship really, I think. So.
Got it. And then we were also, you know, having a lot of people who were curious about how you know, try to balance your time between working at a startup and especially when you were in school and doing that as well.
Yeah, that is one of the, probably one of the most stressful parts of running a startup if you're still in school. But it's also one of those questions that you kind of have to answer more personally. I can give some advice on it though. When I started out, even in high school, when I started working on what was at the time YTAG, which is the laser tag game that turned into Teleportal, I would schedule in my calendar every single thing I did, you know, every day. Like, you know, every class, every homework assignment, and I would kind of have it to like the 15-minute mark or the 30-minute mark. And it became extremely stressful because, and I actually brought that framework into college with me because I thought I was being more productive with my time. I thought, okay, great. I know from 6:15 to, you know, 9 or whatever, I'm going to work on Teleportal, and from this to this, I'm going to work on this. And what ended up happening was my brain was saying, okay, well, I'm kind of in this mode. You know, I'm in Teleportal mode right now, not in school mode or vice versa. And doing that context switch constantly was just, it wasn't worth the productivity. Like the perceived productivity gain was not actually substantiated. So I ended up just at a certain point saying, okay, no more, you know, scheduling time. I'm going to work on what I feel is most productive for me to work on right now. Within reason, of course. If there is an upcoming exam or an upcoming, you know, assignment or there's research to do, I would of course do that first. I would usually try to prioritize that. But then I would go back to Teleportal and with any extra time that I had, work on that. The other part of that I would say is there's like this, you know, hustle mentality that works for some people. It doesn't work for me as much. You know, I'm like very like I love working and I'm probably a workaholic. I love working on pretty much anything, usually Teleportal. But I think it's also important to, you know, spend time with friends and spend time with family and like have those experiences, especially in college. College is a really fun experience. So enjoy life in addition to work, because not only is it that human part and that human connection that's super important in general. But it'll just make your work way better. It'll make your work more enjoyable. You'll have better ideas. You'll be able to bounce ideas subconsciously off of other people. Like I think it's good to have, the hustle side and the relaxed side of your life.
Got it. And then I know we said that we were going to end this at 3:45, but it seems like we're still getting a lot of questions
That's okay.
in the chat. Would you be willing to stay maybe 10 to 15 minutes over?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Thank you so much. I think you briefly touched upon your experience in college, and a lot of people were wondering what Georgia Tech was like for you and how you think, the college experience might be for others.
Yeah, honestly, I love Georgia Tech. Making the decision to work on Teleportal full time instead was very, very difficult. Georgia Tech specifically was and still is an amazing research institute, first of all, and I'm still very connected and very pretty involved in the research there, in the teams, but and the classes were fun too. I definitely learned a lot while I was there, but at the same time I realized that Teleportal's time was kind of now, and that I could return to Georgia Tech at a later time. I talked with a few people there as well, and I can still go back, but Teleportal really needs its time, really has this momentum going, and spatial computing is not going to be the same as it is now in 5 years. Spatial computing as a field, whether you call it augmented reality, virtual, whatever, all the same kind of stuff, it's been around for decades. It is not new, but there are a lot of things inside of the space that are very new. And as we look in the future, and in the very near future actually, and we see Apple and Facebook Reality Labs and Google and Microsoft and others coming out with mixed reality hardware, the time is really now. That was kind of the idea. So yeah, it was a tough decision, but still pretty involved there, and the college experience is great.
Got it. And then touching back on, you were saying that this field of spatial computing probably won't be the same in the next half a decade. Where do you think the future of spatial computing is really heading towards, and what are some of its exciting possibilities?
I think spatial computing is probably the biggest transition that the biggest transition that computing has had since command lines went to graphical user interfaces. And it's probably even a bigger transition than that. When we went from these command line, from punch cards and then to command line interfaces, and then from command line interfaces to graphical user interfaces, with Alan Kay and Smalltalk, at Xerox PARC and others. And then of course, the Lisa and the Macintosh, helped democratize that. Though that was such an incredible transformation. And I think beyond the transition from desktop to mobile, we are going to see our current computing interfaces largely become deprecated in favor of skeuomorphism, in favor of spatial interfaces that represent objects, skeuomorphic objects around us in the world. And that is going to require not only a new user interface paradigm and user interface researchers and user experience design and engineering and networks and all the things that I've touched on in the talk, but it's going to require new technologies at the bottom of that stack, and that's what we're really excited to work on at Teleportal. But it is one of the biggest transitions that in computing I think that we'll see probably in our lifetimes, because it's bringing out this the whole point of a computer is to offload data and to do something useful with that data and to bring it back to the human. If you really break it down, that's basically what computing is. And when we can actually bring it out into more of an intuitive like human interaction, like human computer interaction is going to be way more human because there's not going to be a screen necessarily. It's not going to be like, another input device that I have to use. It's like I'm changing the real world. That's really exciting to me.
Yeah, it seems really cool, especially like I'd assume that when you start interacting with computers in a 3D space, you have like a lot more bandwidth to communicate exactly what you want it to do. Like, now we're limited with like a keyboard, we might be able to like drag things in 3D space, manipulate things in 3D space.
Yeah, I think there are going to be interactions that people prototype that are so beyond our current realm of understanding, just by virtue of having this technology in their hands. On the flip side, though, the keyboard and the mouse they're very efficient. Like a mouse, you only have to move a little tiny, bit across the mouse pad for the cursor to move a larger amount across the screen. So there are going to be challenges with that, with dexterity, and with making it accessible to all, because not everyone's going to be able to like get out of their chair and wave their arms around to use their computer. I think that the mouse made the computer actually more accessible than that. So it's going to be interesting. We're going to need a lot of hands on deck to build spatial computing properly. We really need a diverse input.
Thank you so much for coming to speak at our school. I hope, I've been receiving a lot of DMs through the event about people saying how cool some of the things you were talking about were and asking us questions. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for inviting me, and thank you all for joining. It's been awesome getting to know you.
If you guys would, for everyone who's in this event, if you guys would like to stay tuned for more events like this, where we bring in thought leaders, we ask them about their work, they share some personal insights, which maybe if you'd like to go down in a similar career, you'd be interested in hearing. I highly recommend you guys join our Facebook group. I'll put it in the chat. This is basically our hub for notifying people about events. It's in the chat. So again, if you guys, really enjoyed this event, we highly recommend you guys check out our Facebook group. And, to make events better, we also have a bit of a feedback form, which we'd really appreciate you guys, take the time to fill out just so we know how we're doing and what we can improve on. And then we'd also like to thank the AI Club's generosity for co-hosting this event with us. We really appreciate it. All right, thank you guys. I'll see you later.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Bye.